That's right, we're doing Mario RPG. And I am far too excited to finally be making this video. I love Mario RPG with basically every fiber of my being. At this point, the game has been with me for almost as long as video games have been, and it has become pretty important to me over the years for a couple of different reasons. Some of those reasons boil down to, I think the game is very good, others are more complex than that, but all I knew for sure was that I definitely didn't want to cover this game too early. Take a look at any of my videos pre-2015 or so, and yeah, even back then I knew I didn't want to have my feelings on a game like this stuck in a video like that. This game has been on my wish list of topics to cover on the channel pretty much since day one. That's over 11 years now of waiting patiently for the right time, and eventually I just had to call it. The time is now! It's hard to fully illustrate how much of the good times are embodied for me by this game. There is basically nothing here that isn't just engraved into my brain and every one of my senses these days. Yeah, let me tell you, the game smells incredible. The gorgeous artwork, the smooth and inventive gameplay, the absolutely banging soundtrack that gets randomly stuck in my head once a week at least, and the writing and story work here, which both rest comfortably in my personal pantheon of amazitudinousness. That word may seem like a bit much, but it's how I feel. And for the record, yes, I am aware that this game just got a full-on remake. That announcement actually is what finally pushed me over the edge to start writing this video. Is this video on the remake? No, it's not. Did I ever think I was gonna get this video done in time for the remake to come out? Also, no, but, you know, parts of me hoped. I am probably playing the remake, like, right now, as I say these words into this camera in some twist of temporal reality, probably loving it. But as always, for these For Better or Worse videos, I want to try to present the games that I'm talking about as closely to how I experienced them as I can. As such, this video will be focused almost entirely on the original version of the game. We will have to save the remake for another time. And I know I don't do this very often, but this channel is supported almost entirely by my Patreon. Monthly patrons get access to bonus materials and 1 week ad-free early access to new videos before they go live on YouTube. The support that I get from Patreon directly assists in getting videos like this made, especially larger, more in-depth ones like this one. www.patreon.com/vzshows, just like the channel name, if you're interested in supporting or even just seeing what I have posted there for the free tier. Anyways, with that out of the way, let's get to the good stuff. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, at long last, is a 1996 video game for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System and eventually the Nintendo Switch, developed by Square, just Square, no Enix yet, starring everyone's favorite mustachioed tradesperson Mario in an adventure that hews decidedly distant from the kinds of excursions we usually take Mario into, and plays much more like Square's flagship franchise, Final Fantasy, did at the time. This was new ground for the adventuring plumber we all know and love, and it was new ground for me as well. At the time, it was pretty much the most distinctive experience I had had with a video game up to that point. And a lot of regular viewers are probably screaming the word missed at their screens right now, and yeah, I see your point, but to me, these two very different titles stand next to each other, becoming basically foundational memories for me in different but equally significant ways. Mario RPG was a massive change-up that I had to see to believe. It's worth pointing out that, yes, I do have a heaping helping of nostalgia attached to this game. It was very much an early in for me, as it were. There isn't much of my life to date that Mario RPG hasn't been a part of it, so naturally my opinion might be a little skewed. But it's also worth pointing out that there are plenty of games that I've loved over the years that have kind of fallen away. They haven't managed to keep up, and while there is still some affection there, the idea of returning to them requires more work than I feel might be worth it. Mario RPG is not one of those games. I play it often. I maintain it on multiple platforms. I bought the remake day one, and as of this writing, am currently enjoying. It's always fun. It's always surprisingly good and well made, and what's more, the story and themes present in the game seem more and more relevant, at least in my mind, as time goes on. And I know what you're thinking. Relevant themes in the game with the giant face sword bad guy on the cover? And my response is, hell yeah, the game with the giant face sword bad guy on the cover, and I'm hoping that by the end of this video I'll have you thinking way too much about what this game means too. So, who remembers video stores? With the game rentals section that's just shelf upon shelf of cartridges for games you've never played. Some for consoles you don't even own. Trips to these stores were like the highlight of my week when I was a kid. They almost felt important, like for just a little while the possibilities were endless. This is the setting under which Mario RPG enters my life. Some of my clearest memories from my childhood were being able to rent this game, moving the spare TV into my room for the weekend, and diving into this game. Friends coming over for sleepovers, and all of us figuring out the puzzles, sussing out the secrets, and figuring out how best to play such an enigmatic little game. I can't speak to what inspired me to take home Mario RPG that first time. Like many games of my childhood, some deductive reasoning is required to get an idea of when my first experience with the game took place, and according to the math it was as early as 2nd grade and as late as 4th. Regardless, I didn't even fully know what RPG meant. Yes, I had played a few before that time, but different genres of games were really only just starting to clarify for me. And let me tell you, just the way this game functions was a mind-blow moment for me. It was so strange and, in a way, annoying. I jumped on the Goomba. Why am I standing somewhere else? Oh, I have to wait my turn and go through menus? That punch didn't even connect. How did it... What do the numbers mean? Like I basically just said, Mario RPG was not my first ever RPG, as it were. Chrono Trigger and Illusion of Gaia had entered my awareness beforehand already, but only ever as fleeting glimpses of games played at friends' houses. Enough to pique my interest, sure, but not enough to really get anything out of them. Mario RPG, on the other hand, was the first game of this sort that I had taken into my home, that I could spend time with and get to know. It wasn't just half-remembered visions of games played while hanging out at Tom, Sebastian, or Remington's houses. It was an actual experience, something wondrous and mystifying that I could actually demystify for myself. It's not a stretch to say that this game is one of my most consistent happy places in life. The world is inviting and varied, the gameplay is smooth and engaging. I find it to be endlessly replayable and charming whenever I decide it's once again time to collect these 7 star pieces and rebuild the Star Road. It is such a powerful combination of an inviting and exciting world, wonderfully drawn characters, a distractingly memorable soundtrack, tension, humor, new ideas, and additions to the world of the Mario Brothers. And how do you start a story in such a wonderfully magical place? Well, you kidnap Princess Toadstool, of course, aka Princess Peach, aka Her Mushroom Majesty, aka sole and lonely monarch of this fungal fiefdom, and as always, her knight in shining denim springs into action. I love this opening cinematic so much. Toadstool, yes, I know we call her Princess Peach these days, but as of this game they were still calling her Toadstool, so we're just gonna go with that for this video, is perfectly content to sit and pick flowers and watch butterflies all the day long until she senses in her heart of hearts, probably led on by the thunderstorm that he brings with him wherever he goes apparently, that Bowser is coming to kidnap her yet again. Mario, hearing thunder, I guess, knows immediately what has happened and gets right to work, and off we go. This happens so often, apparently, that Mario spends absolutely no time putting together any details or a plan of any kind and heads directly to Bowser's castle, where he is greeted with open doors. It's kind of like even Bowser knows they're all just playing roles at this point. All the world's indeed a stage, and we are merely players, performers and portrayers, each another's audience outside the... Sorry. But you're also welcome. It's interesting, though, because the princess getting kidnapped is part of the plot of this game, but it is wholly unimportant to the grander scheme of things that this game has planned for basically the next page of the story. The opening kind of sort of tutorial chapter of the game is a really standard rescue the princess narrative. Bad guy kidnaps girl. Good guy rescues girl. The end flashes across the screen and everybody leaves the theater, home to their spouse and 2.5 kids, getting ready for another day at the cinnamon-flavored dental floss factory and make that money. It's outdated, is what I'm saying. What this little excursion in the beginning does do, though, is it puts Mario into the right place at the right time to see what's actually going on here. Because it's big. Bigger than any of us can be led to expect. Most of the way through releasing the princess from her predicament, no, if you ask me, I don't know how they're getting out of this one, Mario is saved from having to admit there's no game plan when the sky opens and everything changes. For a world that is traditionally so insular, the story of this game is a real shock to the system. Mario is rescuing the princess once again. It's happened before. It will happen again. The expectations are clear. And in the midst of maybe the most perennially iconic moment in the story of this world, a giant sword cuts through the literal sky and brings everything to a stop. Enter the Smithy Gang, a new and terrifying threat in the world of Mario and the Mushroom Kingdom, dead set on taking over everything, making it their own and no one else's. The force of their arrival sends Mario soaring through the skies, conveniently landing right in his own pipe chimney. Sounds gross, but it's not. And after a debrief with an anxious Toad, Mario, still set on rescuing the princess, heads back to the castle to get the work done. Mario is stopped completely in his tracks, though, when he suddenly understands the scope of what has happened, and with the bridge being out thanks to this new menacing presence, Mario has no choice but to take the long way around. What begins next is a charming and wondrous journey across the world that Mario calls home, and what wound up being my first real exploration in a turn-based JRPG like this. Like I said before, I had had brief dalliances with Chrono Trigger and Illusion of Gaia, and now that I think about it, Final Fantasy Mystic Quest was in there somewhere too, but Here and Now was my first real opportunity to understand how a game like this works. Thinking back on it now, though, is kind of funny because as a kid, I assumed that this whole battle situation was to be taken literally. Everybody lines up and stands stock still, respectfully waiting until their turn to attack and hurt their opponent. You know, it's like a football game. I didn't understand the concept of abstraction, or compression of time, or stats, which is what is going on here. Eventually I managed to figure out that bigger numbers here meant better numbers out there, and that the whole turn-based conceit made things so much richer in the mind, allowing for things like item usage and spell casting that really awakened a whole new angle of interest for me. The fact that I wasn't limited to one character, but was actually taking a whole group of party members with me was a really cool new concept. The idea that every character in the party had a stash of spells they could conjure up at any moment in battle was a super exciting proposition that became one of the big reasons I got so attached to this game initially. Needless to say, despite my early bafflement at the movement and mechanics of a JRPG, I took to water pretty quickly. I'm not saying I figured out all of the intricacies on my own all the way back in grade school. I was, all things considered, not very good at this game, but the simple, intuitive way the game presents its concepts was a valuable learning experience in the end. It's worth pointing out that so much of what Mario RPG does as a game kind of became the standard for me. Readjusting to an active time battle system when I eventually moved on to playing other games in the genre was bewildering and frustrating. I was always trying to pull off timed hits in Chrono Trigger, and sometimes still do to this day, just out of habit. Finding out that each character had to manage their own little pool of magic points was a whole other thing to think about. Syrup is a way better name for MP recovery items than Ether, if you ask me. And in good God-fearing JRPGs, it turns out you keep your feet on the ground. No jumping allowed. Except for that. I guess. You know what I mean. What were at the time eccentricities of Mario RPG's mechanical approach, while holding shades of other games in the genre, were pretty distinct in the larger landscape. Legend of the Seven Stars makes a point of being an easy entry for new players to the genre, or even young kids playing their first ever RPG. A gateway drug, if you will. Wherein most games you're moving cursors around menus and looking at a whole bunch of numbers and text all the time, Mario RPG assigned each of the commands you can perform to a specific button on the controller, making the menus you are navigating simple and intuitive, taking advantage of everything available on the controller. And this is just one of the many ways this game seems to be trying to streamline the process. Battle is strictly turn-based. Once someone's turn arrives, the action of battle freezes until a command is given. The whole party shares one common MP pool, which this game calls flower points. Your party fully heals after every boss fight. Items that revive down party members are also a full heal every time, and even using a consumable item in battle will sometimes result in the game randomly throwing you a freebie, giving you that item back even after having used it. Mario RPG endeavors to be as painless an experience as possible. Perhaps the most infamous inclusion in the RPG half of this game, though, is the use of timed hits. Real-time commands you can use to juice up the attacks you are delivering, reduce incoming damage from enemy attacks, and even unlock the hidden power of certain spells. This is something I have heard both lauded and decried about this game. Personally, I like it. I think it's a good way to keep the player engaged in the activities of the game and speed up the progress of battles pretty much across the board. It's also properly challenging at times. I have most of the rhythms of these timed hits down to muscle memory at this point, and even I still miss the occasional one from time to time. I do understand the gripes that people have with it though, as I myself even want, to a certain degree, an easy and low-focused turn-based battle experience, something that I can just mindlessly hit A or X to finish while watching TV on the other monitor or whatever, and I can imagine that in a very grind-heavy game, timed hits would get monotonous. It's also interesting that there is no visual element to the process at all. Mario goes for the attack, and if you let him, he'll just attack. Press a button at the right time and, oh, he adds an uppercut. There's no prompt, there's no hint. It's almost like the game is trying to keep timed hits a secret. I know that the remake changes this, but I do like how clean the original game ends up looking, leaving it all up to the player, but it's so funny to me that the mechanic is mentioned once, at the start of the game, in a tutorial, and then it is never mentioned again. So if you're someone who just blows through tutorials and you don't take notice of it at that moment, then it's pretty likely you wouldn't even know you were missing anything after that point. A lot of the out-of-battle interactions, on the other hand, come from this game holding on to a decent amount of the Mario franchise's heritage as platformer games. Mario RPG goes to great lengths to make sure that this still feels like a Mario game. You can jump, you can run, there are coins and item boxes strewn throughout the world for you to find and collect. Take out all of the turn-based battle stuff and you could make a pretty functional game out of what is here. Maybe not necessarily a good one, but still functional. There is a pretty delicate balance at play here. The intricacies and intentional design of something like a Donkey Kong Country, a Mega Man, or even traditional Mario games are not here. You don't have to be good at the jumping. There's no circumstance where a missed jump or a botched landing is a game ender. Failing to avoid an enemy's contact does not greatly hinder your progress, mostly only taking some of your time. The challenge is not in traversing space. The point of the game is to experience the story, see the world, and meet the characters. And so the challenges you face are in battle, away from physical movement, and found instead within the design of the game's combat scenarios. but that's not to say that movement and location design aren't huge parts of the experience. A lot of other JRPGs of this time will find ways to make movement and being in the world feel special in their own way, but I remember a distinct feeling of sterility that came with playing many of them after having experienced Mario RPG first. It just didn't come alive in the same way. Jumping and in-world collectibles may be secondary to the experience of Legend of the Seven Stars, but there is a pretty notable feeling of agency that is presented by how you are allowed to move in this game. Everything is linearily designed, but the way you move along that line is engaging and detailed. Little bonus challenges centered on exploration or precision jumping make for great little diversions every now and then. And let me tell you, actually being in 3D space with the monsters and enemies that are a threat in any given area instead of random encounters was a revelation at the time. I don't even mind random encounters, I actually kind of like them in the right contexts, but the ability to be able to mitigate incoming danger through spatial awareness and reflexes offered empowerment and provided a whole new level of story in any given space. How you moved through anywhere was not just active but reactive. Your trip through any given dungeon or cave or sunken ship took on a whole new meaning, not having to leave it up to your imagination. Mario RPG in these ways was the perfect gateway RPG for me, and I'm sure it was for many others as well. The recognizable property, the comforting and forgiving mechanics, the exciting and lively level design. This game doesn't just invite you into its experience, it takes your coat, pulls up a chair, and offers you a hot drink. And while some might think of this as baby's first RPG, I resist the sentiment while not refuting the statement. This game is definitely an entry point into the genre, but I'm a firm believer that there's still lots to get out of playing this game, even in this day and age. If I'm honest, I had never been fully drawn in by Mario games up to this point in the series. Can you really call Mario a series? Well, for as much as you can think of it as a series, Mario games have always been kind of a back burner thing for me over the years. Super Mario World is a game I love a lot, but is rather distant from the world it takes place in. The static camera and single-track interaction, as in running, jumping, and picking stuff up, makes for a very fun game, but kind of a thin experience. There isn't much going on beyond wide aesthetic swings at places like vast wildernesses, haunted houses, or weird forests. There's no function beyond just providing obstacle course-like traversal of any given environment. It is a game that speaks foremost to the imagination, and it does that very well, don't get me wrong. Like I said, Super Mario World is one of my favorite games of its era, but it serves a very specific purpose. It's a game I can play without having to worry about motivation or anything deeper than Princess Gone must rescue, here we go, or to make ROM hacks out of. Even Mario 64 years later, another one of my favorites, was more of the same, and not much else. Being able to fully wander and explore the world around you was an astounding leap forward, but it really was more or less a sightseeing tour between here and Princess. Again, it got the imagination running, but people seeking a story that takes advantage of its world will be left wanting. At this point, as far as I'm concerned, Mario RPG is the Mushroom Kingdom. With towns and homesteads, dungeons and wilderness, natural wonders and dangers abound, and a big part of why is how the world is pulled together and given life. It hits all of the beats it needs to in order to fit in. There's a kingdom where Toadstool is the princess, a mushroom kingdom, as it were. There is a Bowser, and he has a castle. We can visit Yoshi's Island, and in order to get there, we have to go through an underground tunnel level that is exactly 1 brick wide at all times. A hilarious little reference to World 1-2, even has the right music. There are Goombas, Koopas, and Spikies, Cheep Cheeps, and Piranha Plants. DK even makes a few appearances, throwing barrels at you down some ramps, referencing nothing in particular. At first glance, nothing is askew or even all that out of place. This is a Mario game after all, and it's dang well gonna feel like one. Even though it's toned down quite a bit, the level design is hardly left wanting in this game. Like I said before, you don't have to be good at jumping to finish this game, but you will be provided with ample opportunity to see how much this game loves letting you move around the space. The Chrono sewers start you off jumping between layers, looping back on themselves to confuse and amaze. The forest maze has you dodging monsters and tracking an aloof and aimless Geno while the catchiest music in the world plays on a loop. And what's a sunken ship without a bunch of really weird and creative 3D space puzzles and minigames? Even a level like Land's End, seemingly just another generic outdoorsy kind of location, winds up having as many as 4 distinct location types and tries to blend together every weird movement mechanic the game has tried up until now. This place is used as the waypoint between 2 different destinations, offering different paths to get to both, and there's a full-on secret passage that, if you follow to the end, spits you back out into a previously unreachable area of the Chrono sewers. That's right, make that 3 destinations, and put me down for never assuming anything about this world design ever again. It's all connected in the shadows of unknowing. And on top of all of that, basically every boss in this game is looking deliciously over at your combat mechanics and wondering what if. The minute Bellome turns Mario into a scarecrow and then straight up eats Mallow, all bets are off. Croco will steal your items, Bowyer will disable entire buttons randomly, and Jonathan Jones throws out the entire format of battle when he challenges Mario to a one-on-one fight. It's not enough that bosses get harder as the game goes on, it's about experimenting with the challenge presented by the concept of battle itself in this game, learning and adjusting on the fly to whatever situation you find yourself in. Though if you don't know the skip for the Jonathan Jones fight, if you just leave one of his little hint sharks alive for the group battle, then you can just pick away at him until his HP runs out, and then he'll never challenge Mario. There you go, instant easy mode, you're welcome. www.patreon.com/VZ shows if you feel like saying thank you. But outside of just the level design, Mario RPG is never afraid to take advantage of the wider situation it has set up for itself. This is a new genre with new traditions, and every step of the way, Mario RPG seems to be excited to show you what it has in mind. Every town, dungeon, and wilderness that you come across is a chance for the game to speak to the new angles and dimensions that it can't wait to explore. What does the Mushroom Kingdom look like? Who lives there? What is the political reality of Toadstool's monarchy? Right off the hop, 7 Stars is quick to outline all of this and more. No longer are we just running along straight lines of the great outdoors, jumping and smashing blocks until the princess is rescued. Here, we get to meet the political agents who are officially charging you with this task, the denizens of the city who are depending on you to bring back their beloved princess, the full opulence of the palace she maintains. And this is all just in the first 60 minutes of the game, by the way. There is a lot of ground to cover. By this point, we already have a multifaceted situation that could serve as its own story just by itself, and the game goes on to give us this kind of scenario not once, not twice, but 6 more times after this, introducing us to a fully fleshed out town or hamlet in the midst of a crisis that needs our help. And that's to say nothing of all of the places that don't necessarily need our assistance and are just there to continue to build on the experience of the world we are in and be interesting just on their own. Before long, all pretext of this being a straight up and down Mario game is gone. New threat, new world, new ideas, new approach. Even when the new big bad isn't a factor in any given situation, there is still something interesting and inventive going on. Nowhere is this more apparent than the southernmost reach of the world, where the most notable landmark is the impossibly large and intimidating Booster's Tower, the only object in the landscape that can hold a candle to Bowser's Keep. Inside is a seemingly endless barrage of twisted architecture and dangerous frivolity. Booster himself, seemingly the very avatar of absurdity, is never far away as we try to navigate this nightmare funhouse to rescue Princess Toadstool, who has somehow found herself trapped inside because that's just how things go. Who the heck is Punchinello, you may be asking? In the context of the game, he's just a dude who hangs out in an old coal mine and spits out bombs, and believes that this will help him accomplish his lofty goals of fame and fortune. He happens to be at the center of the tragedy unfolding in Moleville by no designs of his own, and his boss fight tells the whole story better than any cutscene will. It's like we're experiencing a new villain origin story in real time. New characters aside, the sunken ship by Seaside Town and the forest maze by Rose Town may be tangentially wrapped up in some Smithy-based shenanigans, but knowing that these kinds of places exist even before there is an objective to go and try to find there is a pretty confident statement that there is a story and intrigue to be found in this world, not just a place to be side-scrolled through. Wandering around the haunted sunken ship, solving word problems left behind by the ill-fated crew to try to get the password to unleash the giant squid that brought down the ship in the first place is some peak mystery and tension-based narrative design. Talking to the right people in Rose Town will reveal hidden secrets that only the locals know about in this already mystifying forest maze. Even the simple existence of Monstro Town on its own says so much about how the game is not just content, but is clamoring to upend the ideologies of the Mario series that we are so used to. Monsters, always found in Bowser's employ up until now, or at the very least a territorial threat to Mario's health, or bigitude, can reform. They can escape to a hidden paradise, where they can remove themselves from the expectations of the system, reforming or even refusing to conform in the first place. Wherever you go in this game, there is always something bigger going on. Sometimes we are doing battle with Smithy and his minions directly, but other times there are just stories unfolding in the world independently. One of the big questions this game asks is, who else could be making political power moves in the Mushroom Kingdom? Such a strange idea to put forward, but they went for it, and just tracking the intrigue of much of the world of this game is such a trip. There are a number of other smaller political players and seemingly almost militaristic entities in this world, all with their own goals and desires apart from the main adventure, and can you believe that this is true of a Mario game? Queen Valentina is in the midst of a monarchical power play attempting to usurp the throne of the Kingdom of Nimbus Land. Booster is essentially a trust fund kid who just spends all day every day sitting in his immense real estate development just enjoying himself as much as possible, who also apparently has enough private hired muscle to briefly occupy a nearby town for his last minute wedding. Jonathan Jones appears to be an isolationist pirate captain who by all accounts isn't afraid to get him and his crew involved in larger conflicts when they happen to cross his personal sense of justice. And the paratroopas of Monstro Town are a platoon of soldiers who help you climb a cliff, and that's the beginning and end of their involvement, but like, this implies that Monstro Town at least has a militia, right?
And none of this is to set this game up for like a Battle of Five Armies style fan fiction. I am perfectly aware that I'm offering way too much weight to these things that are just cool little bits of intrigue bolstering the world around us. It just all strikes me as a fascinating look at the world Mario exists in, or rather could exist in. Up to this point, there was nothing in the environments of Mario games that presented with any kind of real intention other than just nature taking its course. Goombas and Koopas are just wandering around their natural habitat, and we happen to also be there.
But now it seems that every step of the way, the game is just excitedly throwing all kinds of stuff and ideas at the board, and frankly, I would be nervous to see what kinds of things they wound up cutting if this is the stuff they went with. Even beyond the situations the game has lined up for the story, pretty much every location in the game is worth revisiting after it has been completed. A reality of my only being able to rent the game in the beginning was that often when I got the game home and booted it up on the old SNES, there would be other save files from the people who had the game before me. And as far as relics of forgotten times go, getting someone else's save file off a rental cartridge is like a relic on a relic on a relic. But these in-progress or sometimes completed save files from other kids, likely from my same neighborhood, offered me a chance to look at the world of the game unhindered by challenge, often allowing me to see what was waiting for me beyond the point that I was stuck at on my own dumb little save file. Even if the scenarios in those late game areas had been completed already, I was still so excited just to see what everything looked like, what the NPCs were like, what items you could buy in what shops. Even after all of the character moments had passed by, the personality and wonderment of the game still shined through. The locations were still compelling, and I could never wait to get to experience their stories for myself. Just from the first few hours of the game, the chapters I could reliably play through on my own, I knew that whatever was waiting for me in the late game was gonna be awesome. Seeing how the characters of the game were written, how the locations of the game were constructed, we were already a long way from what I thought any given Mario game was going to be, and so the potential for this game in my mind was just staggering. And if you haven't guessed yet, when I did finally see this game in its full glory, I was not disappointed. I just have to say, the writing in this game is hilarious. There aren't many moments here that don't elicit at least a smile from me even to this day. Moments where the gameplay is brought to a halt for some exposition aren't met with exasperation from me. It's kind of exciting. Between these super expressive sprites slapsticking their way through goofy moments and the written dialogue of any given situation, there is a pervasive sense of personality that emanates from this game. Having Mario be a silent protagonist for the duration is such a delight precisely because of how they lean into it and have most of what Mario is trying to convey done in a charades-like pantomime. It starts with Mario's impossible little portrayal of the bridge to Bowser's Keep going out, and by the midpoint of the game, everyone is on board, turning these breaks in gameplay into proper little productions. I especially love when Mario is trying to specify at one point that he is looking for a star piece and not a star, and the way in which he chooses to act it out is at first confusing to his conversation partner. An utterly pointless little joke, but exactly the kind of thing that this game pays attention to, adding flavor to the experience at large. If a character is delivering more than one line of dialogue in a given conversation, it's a safe bet that you will have a clear idea of what kind of person they are, their general attitude and basic outlooks by the time you resume control. Even the NPC characters who are just hanging out waiting to deliver their single line of text when you speak to them, more often than not totally hold their own. I don't think this is some legendary comedic text that needs to be taught in schools or anything.
Actually, yes I do. This game is amazing.
But the remarkability of this game's writing is how confidently it approaches every moment on every layer. This game isn't just thinking about the dialogue it is delivering. There is deliberate and elaborate comedic blocking and choreography that is taking place. Even if a joke or a bit lands flat, it doesn't really matter because it's already on to the next thing. It may not be getting as many laughs as your average Nate Bargatze special or whatever, but the fact that a console video game from the mid-90s was displaying the wherewithal to hit comedic beats as consistently as Mario RPG does lends it an exciting novelty, and you kind of can't help but appreciate it all the more for that. There is a Looney Tunes kind of appeal here. Just seeing these simply rendered characters suddenly break into such exaggerated displays is itself funny, elevating and bolstering the already witty writing underlining the whole affair. This is the kind of presentation that is more than the sum of its parts.
It's the perfect tone for a story set in a world that is, at its core, ridiculous. I know it's old hat to point this out, but it is worth remembering Mario is a plumber who eats magic mushrooms to help him save a princess from a giant fire-breathing dinosaur turtle. Yeah, pointing that out doesn't really break any new academic or intellectual ground, and pretty much just reveals pedantry disguised as criticism, but you can't deny that the premise, as stated, is a bit of a tone setter. Mario has been doing the whole Mario thing for so long at this point that it's pretty easy for Nintendo and audiences to just play the whole thing straight and not ask any questions.
Mario RPG, on the other hand, asks plenty of questions, and I would say goes above and beyond in terms of self-awareness, making this game into something completely different. And when I say self-awareness, I don't mean winking to the camera, informing the audience that, yes, this game knows it's as goofy and stupid as you think it is, and you are very smart for thinking that, audience member, but more in the vein of, where can we go with this tone and premise? What does embracing ridiculousness afford us in this venture? The answers that Mario RPG comes up with are not ones of cynicism and self-deprecation, but are ambitious and magical in their execution.
There is no way you can prepare yourself for a game where you do battle with a living wedding cake that then ends up becoming one of the most infamous boss battles in the entire game. This isn't even an optional side quest boss or anything. This is main story, my friend. I don't care who you are, you can't prep for that.
This is just one example. It's probably the easiest to outline in an elevator pitch style like I just did, but this game is never short on ways to push the limits of what you'll encounter on this journey. How does diving into an active volcano suit you? Yeah, what if there was a zombified dragon waiting for you at the end? What about a whole level scaling a beanstalk to reach a kingdom in the clouds? How about a four-eyed rabbit dog thing that lives in the sewers and will eat anything, and I do mean anything that crosses its path? Remember the sunken ship level I mentioned earlier? Ever since playing that level, it stands out to me as one of my favorite game environments from pretty much any time. It's hard to express just how much of a change, not just the environment, but the presentation of the space really is. The game asks you to put aside the combat and story focus for a moment to match wits with a series of clever challenge minigames and a decently difficult word puzzle. These are left for you by the doomed crew of the ship, and the whole time you know that your goal is to do battle with the giant squid that brought the ship down in the first place. Enter the password correctly, and you are greeted with this scene. When you make it into the treasure chamber, you don't even see the squid. You have to fight through 2 rounds of tentacles first. The tentacles even have a move dedicated to taking away one of your party members, and when they come back, they have the fear status effect. Yeah, it's not subtle. These are the kinds of wild swings in tone that the game explores at length any chance it gets. At times, it's like a fairy tale bedtime story, wondrous and comforting, the kind of thing tailor-made to usher in sweet dreams and feelings of safety and warmth. At others, it's dark and foreboding, frightening and cold, and sometimes it's just straight up strange. Need I remind, wedding cake. For every time the game reassures you that this is a nice and cozy, friendly game, by all means curl up in here and get comfy, there's always at least a little bit of danger waiting to sneak up on you wherever you go. And if you think a living wedding cake, yes, I'm still harping on this, was an interesting choice, then it's worth pointing out that the general enemy designs in this game are nothing short of admirable. They themselves are such a solid representation of the huge range of tones the game traverses. Everything starts out okay with Goombas, Koopas, and all the usual suspects, but as early as Bandit's Way, the second level of the story, you're more than likely to run into one of these guys, which, I don't know, strikes me as a wild choice. So wild, in fact, that the game just kind of shoots for the stars after that, and on that trajectory succeeds, if you ask me. There isn't anywhere you can go in this game and not find some truly over-the-top monster designs or concepts. The marionettes in Booster's Tower, intimidatingly large crabs in underwater areas, whatever this thing is in Barrel Volcano. Who are the Forkies and where did they come from? I'm just asking. All of the haunted area themed enemies, just wow. Who heard Mario game and thought this? The most memorable for me would likely have to be the time, which I might add only happened like last year, where I was wandering around Star Hill and found out that one of the enemies there is just a reanimated elephant skeleton, rendered in disturbing detail. Just in the random regular battles, not a boss or anything, just hanging around. It doesn't get much weirder than that, though I guess getting ambushed by these guys on your way out of Booster Tower is pretty up there. I would be devastatingly remiss to not mention the soundtrack writ large at this point. For a game that is from the ground up about recalling expectations and then specifically shattering them, the music of this game follows suit and then some. Not content to simply remix the tunes we know from Mario games past, the choices made by composer Yoko Shimomura in how to musically represent any given moment of play feels like it is always working on multiple levels. There are some classic tune remixes, sure, but the sum total of everything is a sprawling opera of storytelling and variety in its own right that I would say ends up being the spring on which the perfect surprise of this game is coiled. The vacillating tone of the whole adventure is illustrated and underlined at all moments by just the catchiest music you'll hear in all of video games. Even when something is dire and dramatic or scary, there is always a lightheartedness underlying the whole affair that reminds you that you're playing a fun and funny Mario game. The goofy, lighthearted moments carry a complexity and drama that doesn't let the moment get complacent. boss themes are somehow both tense and a little funny, somber and sad moments can still spark a little smile. Everything is calculated perfectly. Instrument choices that reinterpret severity, some reverb on a piano to make it less of a downer, and that's before mentioning the moments where Shimomura just kind of takes a moment to flex. Barrel Volcano, the battle with Smithy, the backing music for Monster Town, yeah, a theme for just a town ends up being so beautifully over the top, and I wouldn't have it any other way. This kind of musical awareness, coupled with the tone and attitude of the game writ large, creates such a strong foundation for the game as a whole, the kind of thing that stops this game from aging out of appeal. It speaks volumes just how faithful the remake, which I'm very much enjoying at this point, is to the original. The way this game chooses to present itself, how it has always come across to the audience, is such a huge part of why I return to this game time and time again, and will continue to do so. Thankfully, now a good many more people can experience this magic as well. But what is a world or story without characters to bring you through it, I hear you asking? And that's a great question, viewers. Who does the game give us to contextualize our experience? Well, it just so happens to be one of my favorite casts of characters out there, just in general. Of course, there's Mario, with us from the very beginning. He is our point of view character, but along the way he is joined by Princess Toadstool, fresh off being liberated from Bowser's clutches once again, and then Booster's clutches, just for good measure, resolving to help take the fate of her world into her own hands. Bowser himself, in an odd twist of fate, his armies broken, his fortress shattered, no one else to turn to. Geno, an ostensible angel descended from the heavens, possessing the form of the hot new toy in the Mushroom Kingdom this holiday season, and a funny little frog named Mallow. Yeah, two of these things are not like the others.
Mallow and Geno are the two new characters that Mario RPG adds to the Mario canon, such as there is one. Original creations for this game and this game alone, hashtag Geno for Smash, but both of them are lovely additions to this game. I really like both of them. They are skillfully assembled presences that help expand this game's identity beyond what you would expect from another Mario game.
Geno is probably the simplest character in the group when you boil it right down. He is, for all we know, an immortal being who sees all and knows all, at least when he's positioned correctly. He has very little character growth throughout the story, as we can clearly see he is fully self-realized from his outset, really only coming across his biggest conflict when he decides to face down Bowyer alone and comes up short. That's kind of the biggest character moment he has, otherwise he's more or less the calm and collected mysterious presence in the group who's ready to explain larger concepts to people when they don't know what's going on. He can also turn his hands into guns and has a bunch of kick-ass spells at his disposal, so, you know, I get the appeal.
Hashtag seriously, Geno for Smash.
In contrast, Mallow is the fulcrum on which much of this game's emotional growth rests. He is a tadpole from Tadpole Pond, appropriately, who begins the game out running an errand for his grandpa, Frog Fuchsius. Mallow, being emotionally vulnerable and recently victimized by a local tough in the Mushroom Kingdom, opts to lead Mario to the wizened frog philosopher in order to seek wisdom and advice on where to go next in this weird conflict we have found ourselves in. All of this leads to Frog Fuchsius eventually revealing to Mallow and the player, if you didn't already suss it out for yourself, that Mallow is in fact not a tadpole, leading to one of the funnier reaction moments in the game. Coming as a shock to everyone, Mallow, now lacking any identity he had previously, fully joins Mario on his quest, hoping to find his real home and his real family along the way. If you ask me, Mallow is kind of the MVP of the game at the end of it all. He becomes the perspective character for the first quarter of the game, being the party member with a voice until Geno joins the group, and he's the one who finds the most character growth and ends up with the most story to tell throughout the game. His adventure sees a real beginning, middle, and end in a lot of ways, and would be the main character's story in any other game. Aside from that, he also remains a useful and powerful member of the party to have in battle, commanding powerful lightning and weather-based attacks that will basically carry you through a couple of tough situations if you plan strategically enough. And hey, you know what?
Hashtag Mallow for Smash 2. Seriously, I don't even play Smash anymore, and I still think there's no reason not to have these two in there.
Toadstool, unfortunately, is not revealing anything new with her presence in this game. The most this game is on her side is that everyone agrees she shouldn't be subjugated by the masculine power figures around her, but that she does need the assistance of her masculine guardians to prevent that. The only agency she shows in the story is her assertion that she is joining the quest despite how everyone else feels about this, and resorts to subterfuge in order to join the party when people try to box her in. She does assert herself at times and shows that she is strongly principled surrounding the issues at hand, even if she then notably relies on Mario to back her up. Otherwise, she has a firm grasp of the situation they are all in and has no problem providing reality checks for people not as far along in their thinking. She is also one of the most useful party members, and really up until these playthroughs for this video wherein I tried to rotate party members frequently for visual variety, she pretty much stays in my party consistently until the end of the game, being the most effective healer of the group and the only character with a revive spell. Basically a necessary combo as the end of the game draws near. I think the strongest character in the bunch, though, is actually Bowser. Similar to Geno, Bowser begins the game self-realized and knowing what he's all about. But the events of the beginning of the game change everything, and so he spends the rest of the story frantically trying to process the reality of a shifting status quo. Old enemies become allies, and an utter lack of resources mean a whole new way of doing things for him. We get to see what he is like out of his element and how he conducts himself when he's not at the top of the world.
Whenever I live stream this game, which is weirdly often, all things considered, I pretty consistently use a strong bad voice, like from Homestar Runner, to voice Bowser's lines. This is partially because it's one of the impressions that I can do pretty consistently, but it's also because the characterization that Bowser is given in this game is not that far off from Strong Bad himself.
Strong Bad is consumed with his sense of exceptionalism despite his constant reminders that he's just a normal person with a wrestling mask and boxing gloves on, who happens to have an imagination that gets way ahead of him most of the time. His delusions of grandeur are always brought low by the utterly standard nature of the world around him and the resources he has access to. Sometimes he makes the best of these situations, but often ends up settling for less than he sets out to achieve, which leads to, in my mind, a general resentment resulting in him being the bully amongst the HSR cast, something that the cartoon leans on to varying degrees to make him a sympathetic character who we want to root for and find endearing, but can also be a flat-out jerk for seemingly no reason when the show needs it without eliciting too many questions from the audience. And the events of the story of Mario RPG have brought Bowser into almost exactly this situation. He thinks he's all that in a bag of chips, and under normal circumstances, he kind of is. But now he has to struggle with the idea that in the end, he's just another character, one among many in the story that we're all a part of. In his mind, he has to be exceptional, otherwise he has no other identity to speak of. He's the tough guy bully character in the group who frequently has to make room on his plate for some humble pie when the reality of his current situation comes crashing back into the forefront of his mind.
And it's also just because the way Bowser's lines are written, you'd swear the Chapman brothers themselves were on the writing staff for this game.
Booster has such a nice place. I miss my fortress. I miss the good old days. Toadstool screaming in terror, Mario rushing in to save her. Oh geez, it's Mario! Oops. Okay, calm down. Don't let him see you like this. Hey, how you been? No, not like that, dummy. They have no idea what they're up against. I'm lightning in a bottle. I'm an earthquake in a can. I'll bust this open in no time. They've thrown me out of my own... I decided to take a vacation. They can't do this to me. Anyways, I was working on a plan to get my house back when Mario walked up to me and begged me to let him join the Koopa Troop. I had no choice but to let him in. It was pathetic.
And if you're wondering why I felt it was necessary to include a paragraph about Homestar Runner in a Mario RPG video...
And of course, who could forget Mario himself, the rock upon which this house is built, so much so you can never remove him from your battle party. He is there and with you the whole game, no questions asked. Mario is the avatar of every silent and ubiquitous princess-saving adventure we have been on to date, renowned the world over for his accomplishments and combat abilities, his selfless devotion to the well-being of the people, and most of all, his jumping. People cannot get enough of the jumping. In today's world, where people seem to be able to diagnose and call out bad writing or weak character development just by smell these days, it is an interesting change-up to see a character like Mario in this game, not just throwing back to the silent protagonist era, but a specified character who remains a wholly uncomplex and completely agreeable presence. This guy is beyond reproach. His lowest character moment in the game is when he leaves Mallow behind in the forest charging towards Boyer to rescue Geno. That's it. There's no anti-hero tendencies, no weaknesses exploited by his enemies. He is just a do-gooder force of nature, and there's no risk of that character construct falling apart. What's so interesting about this is that he's not like other silent protagonists of this or most other genres. He's not just a cipher for our actions in the game. He has a name, a history, and a healthy amount of celebrity wherever he goes. If people don't recognize him on sight, they at least have heard of him and quickly and easily project expectations onto him. The kind of thing that is perfect for creating character conflict, but it never manifests. He is completely uncomplicated. There are like 3 moments in the game where you can choose to do things that get characters upset at you. Jumping on the organ at Marrymore, climbing the shelves in the Mushroom Kingdom store, and stealing the treasures from the guy in Rosetown. And that one's a weird one because you don't even know you're making a choice until afterwards, really. And if that's the most detestable thing you've done in your life, then you're doing pretty okay. Okay, small editor's note here. While I was editing this video, I was homesick from work one day, and I decided to play the game again to get some extra footage I thought I might want, and I realized that there are actually several moments where you choose what Mario's response will be, and usually I just zoom through them, because I'm a good guy. But it turns out you can actually make him say or imply some pretty rude stuff. You can even make Mallow start crying again when you first meet him, which I don't think I knew. But I only found one rather inconsequential moment that didn't allow you to just turn right around and give the correct answer immediately. And I guess you could decide just not to give the guy his wallet back in the end. But if it's story dependent, they don't let you progress until you make Mario say the right answer. So my point still stands, even if you can give Mario a bit of a toot about the whole situation.
And at this point, I do want to specifically push back against the idea that an uncomplicated character is not a character at all. There's plenty you can do with characterization rather than development. But what's so fascinating to me in this case is how Mario's tacit presence throughout the story allows the world around him to become the character of examination throughout the game.
As a story, it is largely episodic, almost like vignettes and chapters that function almost completely self-contained. There is the overarching driving mission, of course, find the star pieces and repair the Star Road, but along the way we will get to see Mario's travel companions experiencing their joys, vices, and conflicts. The lives of the citizenry of the world end up shining brightest possibly amongst games of this generation and genre just overall. Characters like Toad, the Chancellor, Raz and Rainy, Chef Tort and his apprentice, Frogfucius and all of the people of Monstro Town, the Nimbus royal family, Garo the sculptor, the creepy hint guy you never get to see hiding in Mushroom Kingdom, Hinopio, the weirdo who lives in the volcano for reasons unexplained, all still hold a place in my mind and memory. These are just the examples I came up with in 60 seconds while writing this paragraph. This game presents a clearly detailed tapestry that can be admired for hours, and it's hard to see just from the outset, but this wide-reaching and interesting world with its people is maybe the most important angle of the game. Because it's not the lives of the citizens we are trying to save. That would be easy, simple to understand. No, it's something else. Arguably something much bigger. Something about JRPGs throughout the years that I love most of all is the degree to which something bigger is always going on. Obviously, that's just kind of what stories are, but, you know, it's not enough that an evil megacorporation is destroying the planet for profit. It's also that there is a super soldier spliced with alien DNA trying to summon a giant meteor to destroy the planet outright. It's not enough that a glitch in this new invention causes a time travel accident. There also needs to be a dark wizard trying to raise demons out of the earth and a robot mother brain trying to eradicate humans in a far-flung post-apocalypse. There is always something bigger going on, and that is true of Mario RPG from a few different angles.
So, you know that joke about how all JRPGs start with the humble farm boy doing chores and end with you killing literal god? Yeah, that's the good stuff right there. I love that stuff. Not even for specifically deicital reasons, just to see it as an exercise in the purest form of raising the stakes. How do we go from the humdrum to the whole dang drum as completely as possible? Start small, end ridiculous. I love that philosophy. There's no limit to where we can go between these 2 points. Mario RPG has its own take on how this kind of thing can work, and not only was it my first glimpse at this kind of storytelling, I think that this instance of it holds up really well as far as the concept goes. Not content to just leave the story at Bowser and his army of monsters versus Mario and whoever he's teaming up with for this one, the game adds a third player in the upper levels of power. It's the Koopa Troop versus the Smithy Gang versus the good and free citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom, championed by none other than the selfless celebrity Mario himself. And yes, in essence, you could argue that in the end, it's still just Mario and his friends up against the bad guys here, but all throughout the narrative, it is cemented over and over again that Mario is taking ownership of the safety and futures of the people he encounters. He becomes their representative on this terrifying world stage he finds himself on, and he doesn't question it. This kind of thing is assumed in other Mario games. There is peril and Mario is on the job making sure everything turns out okay. No one needs to discuss this, it's just the right thing to do. But in Legend of the Seven Stars, it is repeated over and over again. The world is thrown into literal peril by the machinations of a careless industrialist who is tearing the world apart, conquering everything before him for the sole purpose of making weapons. Look no further than the utterly iconic moment of the rote and predictable Mario saves the princess sequence being interrupted by a literal giant sword with a face falling from the sky and piercing the walls of Bowser's Keep, utterly dwarfing what was previously the oh-so-intimidating pinnacle of the adventure we were on in every other Mario game. There is always something bigger going on. XIII, as he's known in the deeper details of the game, is exactly what he seems to be, a big old sword with a face and a menacing disposition about him. The herald of the soon-to-be infamous Smithy Gang, XIII is just the ominous shadow of things yet to come. We're off the map, as it were. Clearly hoping to announce themselves with an unmistakable statement, the Smithy Gang gets right to work, and the full extent of their potential unfolds into new dimensions of trouble with every step on our adventure. One by one, the cities of the free peoples of the world are shrouded under the pall of this new dark influence. The Mushroom Kingdom beset by a legion of menacing Shy Guys on pogo sticks, Rose Town needled with arrows from the sky, petrifying any who are unlucky enough to be struck, and Seaside Town being taken hostage and locked in a shed, which would suck, you know. Anyways, clearly these hooligans will stop at nothing to achieve their dark designs. We haven't really talked about what Geno is doing here yet, but if you didn't already know, or you hadn't already guessed, it's all connected. Previously, I described Geno as essentially an angel come down from the heavens, borrowing the form of a doll in an attempt to accomplish his mission, specifically finding the 7 star pieces, which are fragments of something called the Star Road. Less a vision of heaven and more a piece of the wider spiritual ecosystem of the world, the Star Road is where wishes go to be turned into shooting stars that then fall to Earth so they can be granted. It is how the hopes and dreams of the world become reality. And it was destroyed when Smithy and company made their entrance. We even see this take place when XIII shatters a great star in the sky and 7 pieces fall to the ground. Gino is here to try, as best he can, to set things right.
But it's pretty clear that on his own, Gino is no match for the Smithy gang. His first confrontation is a lot of words and one half-hearted attempt at physical intervention. If you ask me, it's not clear here if even the higher powers of this world are really all that powerful in the face of this kind of threat. Mac, Boyer, the Axum Rangers are all huge imposing presences in their moments. XIII so fully shattered the edifice of power in this world that he has made it onto the world map, like the one that the Chancellor gives you and has apparently had up until now. Yuridovich even spends most of his time in the game disguised as the populace of a town. Not a person in the town, the whole town. Infesting this piece of the world from the ground up. The angels that watch over us can do nothing in the face of this terrifying war machine. There's a level in this game that I have mentioned briefly already, but I want to talk about a little bit more at this point called Star Hill. It has always stuck out in my mind whenever I play this game, which is strange because it is a complete cul-de-sac in the story. It is an excursion that appears in the middle of the adventure, is unlike anything we have seen thus far, and once it's over, it never comes up again. But while you're there, you are given the opportunity to examine these little stars you find along the way. Gino explains that these are in fact the wishes that were transformed into shooting stars at the Star Road until Smithy destroyed it. And indeed, listening to what the little curiosities have to say, that is exactly what they are. Desires, wishes, goals of the people, of the world who we have met up to now. If you're paying attention, you can start to put names to the wishes you're hearing at that moment. Some of them friends, some of them foes, some of them members of our own party. One of them is pretty obviously Luigi. Star Hill has so little to do with the rest of the game or the story at large, but it's a small moment where we can kind of do a vibe check. Remember why we are doing this. It's a strangely empty place that passes without comment, but if you take a moment, suddenly it's kind of everything. Even if not every character is represented here, even if some of these wishes are simple or shallow, it's a pretty powerful reminder that there is a dimension to everyone that we don't immediately see. Everyone we have come across in this game has a dream, a wish for themselves and others, and Smithy took that away. Smithy doesn't initially even know what the Star Road is, its destruction a happy accident in his mind. All he knows is that anything that empowers the people he is subjugating is a bad thing, and he wants it to stay dead. Who is anyone to say that a world is undeserving of its hopes and dreams? At the end of the story, at the height of everything we've been working towards, we get to travel through the world that Smithy comes from, where he lives. It's cold and desolate, gray and lifeless, constantly enveloped in what looks like a dust storm, or it might even be ash. This is where we realize that all of the Smithy gang members we've battled up till now have been automatons, robots, a literal war machine in senseless mass production. There is always something bigger going on. We may not be doing battle with a literal god here, but we are confronted by something truly twisted. A powerful man content to spit in the face of an entire world on a scale and in an arena unfathomable to those who hang in the balance until it was already upon them. Maybe already too late. Someone who will willingly sacrifice the dreams and the world of anyone in his way for this. There is always something bigger going on, and this game was the first time I had that kind of realization. The first time I could see a true and vast distance between home and here. The kind of story that goes beyond some nebulous save the world narrative and has real stakes. This is what Mario is taking on, the task of traveling far beyond the reaches of his home to face down powerful, indifferent sources of violence and restoring the dreams and wishes of all of the people around him. And he doesn't hesitate, not once.
So, for this final chapter, I want to start with some anxiety. In that, anxiety is something that I bring to most things in life. It's something of a specialty. I tend to look for the anxious read on things like books, movies, games, situations in life. You get the picture. But Mario RPG is one of the most effective ways for me to make all of that anxiety go away.
I think a big part of that is how much of a comfort blanket this game is for me. In retrospect, I'm not convinced that I would have been such an early convert to JRPGs if I hadn't had Legend of the Seven Stars as my initial landing pad. The genre has provided me with some of my favorite experiences through the years. Square Enix alone is responsible for a frankly irresponsible amount of my favorite games overall. And it all started here. And knowing my own tendencies, if I had started somewhere else first, it may not have gone this smoothly. Maybe it might have been too difficult. Maybe the tone and aesthetic might have been too sterile. As much as it feels reductive to say so, I'm pretty sure a lot of my love of the genre as a whole is low-key me chasing the feeling of playing something like Mario RPG again for the first time. A game with the kind of obvious markers of joy and excitement for existing that Mario RPG wears right out on its sleeve. The kind of game that makes that anxiety go away. It kind of freaked me out for a bit at one point when, in the interest of fairness, I tried to pick out shortcomings, a few drawbacks that might even out my what I fully knew was ultimately going to be very one-sided and unapologetic propping up of this game, and I couldn't. There is not a moment of this game that hits wrong or is disappointing to me. There are no unfortunate decisions that catch me wrong. For the record, I can pick out more than a few things about Chrono Trigger that I would call flimsy or half-baked, even though I think they end up working to the game's benefit in the end. But for Super Mario RPG, I came up totally blank. They might be there, but I apparently am not capable of materializing them enough in the mind to record them here and now.
Even just trying to write notes while capturing this game for footage, I could only manage to write down awesome little details that elevated this game above its already fantastic standing with me. The small nods and details that display just how much thought, care, and what seems like excitement probably went into the process of making this game. The way the tadpoles and tadpole ponds pop up to see what's happening whenever something does happen. The way Mario indicates he's ready to go by doing a perfect Bowser impression while playing with Gaz. The way Geno figured the Geno doll was the strongest of all of the toys because it was used to literally knock Mario unconscious earlier that evening. The way the characters are all covered in soot after the Punch and Hello boss fight. The way the star piece in the mines cleans the soot off of them when they find it. The way the Booster Hill track is geographically across the world from where we started the game, and so it has all of the early game landmarks like in the correct order from our perspective. Jumping on the organ in Marymore is never not funny. Bowser's Hurley Gloves weapon that allow him to throw Mario at the enemy and replace him in the lineup with the Mario doll. Unless the Mario has a status effect, then he just throws the doll instead. The Goomba kids in Monstro Town who want to help Bowser and Mario on their adventure, and so if you offer to buy from them, it opens a store page, and the only thing that's for sale is the base early game healing mushroom. The Three Musty Fears' scavenger hunt, which is based entirely on purely verbal clues that relate to unique landmarks you've seen throughout your whole adventure so far. The way Hinopio in the Volcano Inn says that he's going to get the beds ready for you, and then when the screen fades back in, you're just lying face down on a bunch of wooden crates. The way the party members' statues appear in the Nimbusland Palace after you rescue the royal family. The way all of those people are there on the cliff watching you fly to Bowser's castle at the end of the game. The way if you get the timed hit on Geno Whirl, it becomes the strongest attack in the game for some reason, and for whatever reason they didn't make XOR immune to it, so if you want to do that fight in like basically one hit, there you go. And finally, the way the Goomba in Bowser's Keep tries to jump out and scare you, but accidentally jumps off the path instead. Peak comedy right there.
And all of this is to say nothing of the Easter eggs and side quests the game offers, the sealed door in Monstro Town, following the dude who's looking for the Great Guy Casino, the hidden optional boss Culex that this game throws in there just to establish that this is the Final Fantasy developer you know and love, even just the great little Easter egg of being able to find Link sleeping in the next bed over from you at the Rosetown Inn was such a mind-blowing thing for a grade school-aged me to see. What do you mean Link and Mario can be in the same game? Can I get Link in my party? What does this mean? Also, did you know that you can find Samus in the Mushroom Kingdom guest room after you finish the Seaside Town boss fight? That's super cool, right?
This list hardly accounts for everything that could go on it, but I think it pretty appropriately represents the attitude with which this game approaches every situation. It's the perfect mix of knowing its audience specifically while still remaining friendly and approachable to anyone new who stumbles into it. Exactly the kind of thing that keeps me coming back to this game over and over again. I can't hope to count how many times I've played through all or part of this game in my life, and just how much joy it's brought me every time. When I need things to be easy for just a little while, this game is always there for me.
Like I said in the beginning, I have been looking forward to making this video for a long time. I love deciding to tackle a topic and slowly see it come together in whatever form it ends up taking. I'm always thinking about how to compose whatever idea I have at the moment into something that I can share with people. It's a process that I enjoy. But I will part the curtain a bit here for a second. This video started life as a backup plan. I have been trying to put together another big passion project video like this for a while now, and both times I've tried to dive in, I've gotten stopped up. It was discouraging and kind of defeating trying to return to old formats for favorite games, and finding that it didn't go as smoothly as it used to. I'll be the first person to admit that video scripts don't come to me as easily as they did in the old days. It used to be a pretty easy affair, but nowadays, I guess the kinds of videos I want to make are more intimidating, demanding more time and energy. I'm lucky if I'm in the right headspace to get writing done when I have time to do any writing at all, which makes it hard to get things written the way I want them to be. That defeat from the other project is still there, and I've been a little scared of trying to tackle something like this again ever since. But Mario RPG has always been a game that rested in my mind as one of those passion project videos. Something that I wanted to make something on one day that could finally put into words why I think this game isn't just awesome, but special and worth your time. What's more is I knew that I would have no trouble writing about it, almost like I had it in the back pocket for just such an occasion. I play through this game at least once a year. I know it backwards and forwards, even if it still surprises me every now and then. When I started putting this video together, I was just typing randomly on my phone one night lying in bed, and suddenly it just started assembling itself. Working on this video after 11 years making stuff like this felt fresh and new and exciting in ways that it hasn't for a long time now. I enjoy working on these video projects, can't really imagine my life without them at this point, but it's rarely easy and is always a challenge on some level. This, on the other hand, felt familiar and accommodating, kind of like playing Mario RPG for the first time, and again every time after that. There was no anxiety. This script, in the form that you're hearing right now, from word 1 to what I wound up recording, took me about 4 weeks. Still a long time, but pretty good considering the kind of schedule that I have these days. It hasn't gone that easily in so long. I had most of it written before ever even picking up the game to record footage. I spent the weeks where I was cultivating the seeds that would turn into this project, humming and doing songs from the soundtrack just constantly, on repeat, usually just at full volume. They were stuck in my head and I wasn't bothered. I invited it. I would frequently have to pull my phone out at any given moment to write down notes or ideas for things to talk about in this video. That's how much this game is ingrained into my very being. It is an understatement to say that this game is a happy place for me. Rather, it is an anchor that keeps me in place in and amongst just all of everything. For Better or Worse is my series where I try to figure out if my old favorite games come out alright with age, if they still carry some meaning after all the years, or if they still hold up, even if just for me. Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars doesn't just hold up, it is so much more. There is no worse here, as far as I'm concerned. For better it is. Every time. No questions, no hesitation.